John Brennan, the president's nominee to be the next CIA director, getting grilled at his confirmation hearing this week. At one point, Brennan said he spoke out against the agency's use of interrogation techniques that some call torture, but when asked why he didn't intervene to stop it, he basically said, not my job.
I had expressed my personal objections and views to my some agency colleagues about certain of those EITs, such as waterboarding, nudity, and others, where I professed my personal objections to it, but I did not try to stop it because it was, something that was being done in a different part of the agency under the authority of others.
Let's bring in our political insiders. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell is a Fox News contributor and former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen in Miami today. Beautiful Miami. He, too, a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Bill Clinton. Pat, let me start with you. What did you think of Brennan?
Oh, I thought he was a lot better than Hagel was in the hearing.
Well, that's not saying much.
It's not saying much. But he got all caught up in this drone stuff, which we're going to talk about later, the stuff on interrogation, and also he's making statements that were incredible. What really came out this week, because the same day he was testifying, we had Panetta, the outgoing Secretary of Defense, Panetta, went to the arm to testify on Benghazi, and then told us what we learned. 2 weeks ago, we talked last week about the difference between what Panetta and Clinton had said about Iran versus Hagel and what he was doing. 2 weeks ago, remember when they went on 60 Minutes and we called it the biggest payoff in history? Now we know what it was, because in that show, I remember suggesting to you that one of the reasons that came out of Hillary's testimony I found interesting to pursue was what was the president doing? We now know the president wasn't engaged. They had a 5:15 meeting for 15 minutes that was pre-planned. He didn't talk to anyone, the Secretary of Defense, Clinton, and by the way, and apparently according to Panetta, talked to no one. And what we have is a foreign policy where it's all coming apart now.
When you were in the Carter administration,
I watched the president
all hands on deck.
The president himself for 10, 15, 20 hours a day, in the middle of the greatest moments of this, involved himself. Personally, I remember when we were trying to get them out the day when they flew home. We were there all night and the next morning, right up till the time of the inauguration. The president was hands-on. The notion that this president was disengaged, talked to no one after this 15-minute meeting that they had, and went off the next day to a fundraiser. Now we understand, and this is causing the Republicans today to start saying, Graham and others, they're going to hold the nominations on both these men until they find out the truth.
Doug Schoen, let me go to you in Miami. It would appear that lights were out at the White House while Americans, including an American diplomat, were under attack.
That's exactly right. And to me, the bottom line question that Pat raises, and certainly, Greg, you raised with your question, is do we have a coherent foreign policy and national security policy, not only vis-a-vis Iran and North Korea, but vis-a-vis the role of the United States in rooting out terrorism in North Africa? What are the role of drones? What is the role of human intelligence? I don't think we really have answers. And the bottom line to what I think Pat says quite clearly is the United States, which had had an engaged president, now has a president who has so far been able to dodge hard questions and the right questions. And now, given these confirmation hearings, Greg, those questions are coming to him, and most particularly and directly his nominees.
Congressman, is this why the president and the White House at large really didn't want to talk about it before the election?
Oh, totally. They wanted to dodge the bullet. They put the freeze down on everything, and they did keep it quiet. But the other story in this crisis, and it's a political crisis of the management of foreign policy, is the Republicans are at each other's throats over two distinct camps. One is the neocons, the ones who want to do drone strikes, assassinations, involve America more aggressively in Pakistan, Syria, they did Libya, they wanted this. And the more traditional Republicans who say a line that always works, which is America cannot be the world's policeman. And the Republicans are divided over this. What should the role of the United States be in foreign policy? And there is no answer coming out of the Republican camp which allows Obama to dominate this stuff with no policy.
Yeah,
he has no
this
policy.
Politically, he has the upper hand.
This drone issue, though, has now popped up. The issue of whether the president can unilaterally just kill American citizens overseas by himself with no other say-so whether we have any rights. You know what? If this were George Bush,
Oh, of course.
remember what happened? They were just capturing people and interrogating and waterboarding them or whatever. And 3 people they waterboarded. This president has killed 4 Americans with drone strikes, including a 16-year-old, without any authorization. The problem here is the vast hypocrisy of our system. We saw this in the Hagel hearings. Half the Democrats know at least that Chuck Hagel has no business being defense secretary, but not one will speak up. Everyone is putting party ahead of country, and we're seeing it on the most important thing, foreign policy. The press took a dive and has covered up so much of this stuff. We find out today that there's more stuff about whether or not there was agents in Benghazi. It's a real mess. And Hagel said, by the way, that Israel, it came out today, Israel was the problem. They had the bomb. They were the greatest threat, not Iran in the Middle East.
Let me put up on the screen a comment by Michael Scherer, who's former head of the CIA's bin Laden unit, about John Brennan and his nomination. Brennan is a patchwork of deceit and suck-uptiness to his superiors. It's not really a word, but I think we...
Go to dictionary.com. You'll get the answer for
we
that.
completely understand what he is saying there. Doug Schoen, how do you handicap Brennan, Hagel?
Yeah, I think Brennan will probably be confirmed. I am one of those who believes, given what Lindsey Graham said today and what Senator Imhoff has said about Hagel, that there's a greater chance of either a hold being put on the nomination or alternatively a filibuster. I think that there has got to be some accounting for the uncertainty of Brennan and the, I think, incompetence and wrongheadedness of Hagel. And bottom line, I think that Hagel is the one most likely to go down.
John?
The quote you put up, the man who said that, Michael Scherer, is a tremendous guy. I've followed this guy for years. I think it's true that Brennan is a weasel. And I think we've seen it after the bin Laden raid. He briefed the media every day from the White House press room, made up the story about how the raid happened, the White House role in it, fabricated. Bin Laden had a gun, he was reaching for a gun, all nonsense. But the bigger issue is Dianne Feinstein, the chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said in that hearing, we've had 11 CIA directors in a row who pull the wool over our eyes up on Congress.
Brennan is disingenuous is the nicest way to put his. This man will say anything. He is truly
a liar.
Scheuer said it.
Scheuer said, you know what? Let me tell you what Brennan said. He said in his testimony, there has not been a single collateral death with the drones. We know 500 civilians at least have been killed.
All right, so Pat, we just learned GDP is negative, unemployment is up, poverty is rising, incomes are falling. CBO says the deficit is unsustainable. What does the president say?
Well, now he's going to talk about the economy. Up till now, and he was going to talk about all the issues D.C. is consumed with, which is interesting. The Pew poll had a poll up, and it showed that the bottom 5 things, the top things people are concerned about, the economy, the deficit, jobs, things you would expect, things the president didn't talk about as inaugural. And at the bottom were immigration, gun control
global
legislation,
warming.
and at the very bottom, global warming. Those are the issues that last week the president was planning to hammer. So we'll see. They now say he's pivoting the economy for the reason you said, and he's going to fight the sequestering. And speaking of hypocrisy, the sequestering bill that he proposed, as we know from Bob Woodward's book, and the Republicans and Democrats in Congress both passed, and now they all deny they know how we got here.
Right. Doug Schoen, what do you expect from the president? Is he going to say, not my fault?
Well, he's going to say he has a job strategy as Pat was suggesting, because the disconnect between the American people and the elites in Washington couldn't be greater. The president knows that his own popularity, while greater than the Republicans, is hanging on a slender reed. He has to make the case that he has a strategy to address the issues, Gregg, you were talking about, which is the fragile state of our economy. That being said, he's going to tie that, I think, to the debt and the deficit. He's going to talk about raising additional revenue because there is going to be no sign of compromise, no willingness to do a deal on the budget in any grand bargain of the type that Bowles Simpson proposed or he was working towards in 2011. And I think we're going to get more of the same with a focus on jobs in the economy and more stimulus spending, Gregg.
John, he just raised taxes on everyone. Now he wants more tax revenues?
Right. He says he wants more, and the Democrats, that's their concerted line. We need another $600 billion in tax revenue. We still haven't gotten to the issue
We
of
haven't gotten any cuts yet.
Any spending cuts. No one wants to talk about it, frankly, in either party. But, Gregg, there's a leak out today that the president, in this speech, is going to talk about debt and deficit reduction because they saw the Pew poll. The polls show this is what people care about. They do
and the
peg.
Fox poll showed the same thing.
All right, the polls show it. The public pegs this debt problem to part of the reason why the economy is lagging. And yet the president ignores this thing.
Well, remember, he never mentioned any of this in the inaugural. We have no, remember, it's not a spending problem. And he never even mentioned the economy in the inaugural. Now he's backtracking. His numbers are going down, and people are upset.
I've only got 60 seconds left. Marco Rubio will be delivering the response to the State of the Union. What do you make of that?
He needs to listen to the political insiders. The three of us on your show every week for a year have been saying the Republicans need a positive message. I don't want to see Senator Rubio coming on there and dumping on the president. Forget that. Come on here and hit three things that we Republicans stand for in health care, job creation, tax policy that are different than the president.
You agree with that, Doug?
Oh, I do. And I go back to the late, great Congressman Jack Kemp. What we need to hear from Marco Rubio is hope, growth, opportunity, optimism, a sense that the Republican Party offers something more than negativism, as John was talking about. Pat has quite rightly referred to them for over a year and a half as the stupid party, and unless and until Senator Rubio addresses the question of how we have a growth-oriented society with low taxes, reduced spending, and offering inclusiveness, which means immigration reform, unless he can do that, the Republicans will be behind the eight ball.
All right, you got the final word on the stupid party. Thank you very much, Doug Schoen, Pat Caddell, John LeBoutillier. As always, you can get more from the political insiders every Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, live.foxnews.com, and they'll be back here next Sunday. You can also follow them on Twitter at FN Insiders, and we'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.